Congresswoman on?
Yes, we have a great special guest joining us now here on Katz and Cosby. We have Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Of course, she represents New York's 21st District. She's also the House Republican Conference Chair, the most senior Republican in the state of New York. Congresswoman, great to have you here on the show.
Great to be with you.
Thank you. You know, I know that you are getting soon the Jack Kemp Award. Bravo to that, because he epitomized taking on progressive policies. I can't think of it being more timely, given what's happening with the revolving door of justice and border and everything. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm so honored. Tomorrow, the New York Republican Party, the state party, is having their annual gala, and I was so humbled to be selected as the recipient of the Jack Kemp Leadership Award. And it's a tremendous 10 years for me. I was first elected 10 years ago, and I was proudly the youngest woman ever elected to Congress at the time. And I've fought every day on behalf of my constituents and really on behalf of all hardworking New Yorkers. And I will tell you, Rita, the stakes are so high. At the beginning of the show, you were talking about the crime crisis, the migrant crisis, out of control in New York City and really out of control across the country. So I'm going to talk about that at my remarks tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing other leaders across the state, my good friend Lee Zeldin, other members of Congress, Chairman Ed Cox, but it's a real humbling honor for me. And right now I'm home in my district. I was just actually up on the northern border in the Swanton sector, so I have updates about the crisis and the catastrophe going on there, as well as, of course, what you're experiencing in New York City with the migrants.
You know, go ahead, Rudy.
Congresswoman, this is Rudy Washington, and I can't think of anybody more deserving than you to get that award. And tomorrow, if I get a chance, I'll come up to you and introduce myself.
Well, I look forward to visiting with you tomorrow. That's so kind of you to say. And while I did not know Jack Kemp, I've gotten to know his son, Jimmy Kemp, and I've met his wife, Mrs. Kemp, before, and he was a fighter, and he stood up for hardworking New Yorkers, and he was a happy warrior, standing up for our conservative principles and standing up for the American dream. So, again, all of us seek to continue to stand up for the American dream, particularly as New Yorkers when we see that under attack every day by the failures in Albany and New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody, we are talking to the great Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Congresswoman, you know, we were talking about crime at the top of this, and this is amazing, this case. We talked about the migrant case. And then you've got the New York Assembly Speaker, Carl Hastie, who's saying he doesn't believe that harsher penalties add to deterrence. I mean, it's unbelievable. What's your reaction?
It's outrageous. It shows how woefully out of touch the Democrat supermajority in Albany is. We have a crime catastrophe in New York State, and I'll tell you, it is, of course, a crisis in New York City, but it's not just New York City. It's places throughout upstate New York as well, in the suburbs, even in the rural communities. I will tell you, in my district, Glens Falls, New York, which is a small city, used to be known and is known as Hometown USA, we had a bank robbery over the past few years. We've had smash and grabs in Saratoga Springs, another small gem of a city in upstate New York. So this crime crisis is real, and it's leading to loss of life of our men and women in uniform and law enforcement. Think about just the avoidable tragedy and loss of life when it came to the recent NYPD officer who left behind his young wife and his 1-year-old, Jonathan Diller, who his family has ties to my district in upstate New York. It is a catastrophe, and to have the Speaker of the majority in Albany say that basically there's no crime crisis and that they don't need to have policies that deter crime, they're out of touch, and that's why I think you're going to continue to see Republicans who are tough on crime, who support victims rather than the criminals, who support our law enforcement and are standing up against defunding the police. That's why you're going to see Republicans continue to make inroads across the state.
Well, Senator Schumer yesterday made a remark that he's going to refer this to the U.S. Attorney's Office for RICO charges for multiple crimes, retail theft in New York, but I haven't been able to get his office on today to get a reaction.
Yes, because they say the cartel is involved in disposing of the things that are stolen.
Yeah, just like the case in the Bronx, Rudy, which you and I were talking about earlier.
Right, so it's organized crime, and you could bring a RICO case.
What are your thoughts, Congresswoman?
My thoughts are Chuck Schumer needs to condemn the defund the police party that he's a part of. He's failed to do that. He has not condemned bail reform. He has not condemned the Biden border crisis and the open border policy. So Chuck Schumer is a leader in the Democrat Party, and he is to blame, like other Democrats in New York State, for this crime crisis and these failed policies across the board. So it's just lip service. It's unacceptable. And again, New Yorkers are seeing through that. And it's not just Republicans, it's independents and Democrats as well, who know that today's Democrat Party in New York State has left common sense far behind, and it's embracing this radical pro-criminal defund the police movement, which, again, is not what everyday New Yorkers support.
Judge Weinberg.
Welcome back to the show, Congresswoman. I want to raise two issues with you. One, you did a wonderful event when you had the hearing on the 3 college presidents, and you exposed the anti-Semitism in American academia. That's number one. And number two, you've been a steadfast supporter of the state of Israel. Would you comment on those two?
Well, first of all, the hearing, I will tell you the question that is now, where everybody saw that question, that was the last question of the hearing, and it wasn't my prepared question. I had thought to myself, how can I ask this in a straightforward, moral way to force them to answer correctly? And the question was, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? And I had assumed they would answer yes in the way that I asked it, and I was astonished that one after the other said it depends on the context. And while it was the last question of the hearing, there was no media there. The world heard. It is now the most viewed testimony in the history of the United States Congress, more than Watergate, over 1 billion views in 1 week. It's now in the multiple billions, and it set off a long overdue earthquake. There was a fundamental lack of moral, strong leadership at these supposed elite universities. And I'm a graduate. My alma mater is Harvard. And to have the university president fail to condemn calling for the genocide of Jews, they have shifted so far to the radical left that they're again out of touch with our American ideals. I think about my constituents in my district. You put up 3 everyday people across this country. They know how to answer that moral question. It was unacceptable that the now former presidents, and it's a good thing they're former, the third should be a former president as well, they failed to answer it. It was a moral question, and it has led to an investigation that's ongoing. They are not turning over documents. We have been forced to issue a subpoena for Harvard, who has refused to comply with our document request. And we will have Columbia University next later on this month with both the president and the board of trustees chair because they have failed to combat and address the skyrocketing of anti-Semitism on their campuses. And this is going to have a cascading effect. It's not just on our oversight of Congress. You're seeing multiple class action lawsuits against these universities for their failure to comply with Title VI protections for Jewish students on campus. But it's a long overdue reckoning, and my question was a moral one, and that's why it resonated, and their answers were so morally bankrupt. When it comes to Israel, I am proud to be strong supporters of Israel. I had been to Israel many times, even before I was a member of Congress. I sit on the House Armed Services Committee, on the House Intelligence Committee. I know very much how important Israel is as our most precious ally in the region when we have so many threats. And to have the equivocation from Chuck Schumer, to have his outrageous statements demanding an election in Israel rather than showing support for the Israeli government as they are fighting for their very existence. And this is going to continue to be a top priority for House Republicans to make sure that we use any possible way to deliver needed aid to Israel at this most important time of need.
And we're talking to Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Congresswoman, you and I were at the ZOA event, Zionist Organization of America. You and also Speaker Johnson gave great speeches. I'm curious your thoughts of what role you think President Biden has in all this. I'm surprised he hasn't come out and condemned some of these protests or anything.
Well, I think Chuck Schumer's remarks were coordinated with the White House.
Yeah, when he came out and spoke, right?
Because Biden couldn't say it. So he said it because he feels he could withstand the challenge.
Yep, I agree with you, John, and I think it's a really important question that you just asked, Rita. There is no question that Chuck Schumer had coordinated that public statement that was unprecedented, that was coordinated with the Biden White House. And as you saw during the State of the Union, they are having issues with their far left in terms of their electorate, and it's showing in polls in places like Minnesota, places like Michigan. And again, the Biden is limiting his support for Israel, which is not where the American people are. They are trying to shore up their electorate, which frankly has anti-Israel, anti-Zionist who are explicitly pro-Hamas, and that's the state of today's Democrat Party, and it's just a travesty. I would also say when it came to condemning the university presidents, we did not hear that directly from Joe Biden. We heard it from the press secretary at the press podium, but that's very different, and we didn't hear it directly from the President of the United States. He had a prime opportunity during the State of the Union, and I know, having worked in a previous White House under President George W. Bush, and also just the process of putting together State of the Union, they make sure they include everything on purpose in that speech, and it was purposely left out, which is shameful. So it's a real difference between the Republican Party, which stands strongly for Israel and condemns anti-Semitism, versus the Democrat Party, where they're seeing a rise of anti-Semitism among their elected officials.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, before we let you go, I want to get your take also on all this lawfare that's against President Trump. What do you think should happen? The New York judge, there's been all this questions on whether the New York judge should recuse himself. The daughter has ties to the Democratic Party, has been raising money. What are your thoughts about that? And also, would you support death penalty for cop killers? That's something President Trump came out with.
Well, I support President Trump's position. I also, when it comes to the judge, we have seen unethical judge one after the other, as well as unethical prosecutors, whether it's Tish James or Alvin Bragg. But in the case of this particular judge and this particular lawfare that has been weaponized against President Trump, here you have a judge who should absolutely recuse himself. He donated to Joe Biden, which is outrageous. He is not able to make an objective decision. And his adult daughter has raised $90 million specifically for Democrat causes going after President Trump. So this is not a fair trial. The American people know that. They see that this is just another example of a weaponized, illegitimately a weaponized law system, whether it's DOJ, whether it's prosecutors like Alvin Bragg, going after President Trump. And you know why? It's because President Trump continues to pull stronger and stronger. Democrats on the left are so desperate that they are in free fall because they can't win fairly at the ballot box. So they have to illegally prosecute and weaponize these assets against President Trump. So I've called for his recusal. It is unethical, and he is a crooked judge.
And you brought up also you do support death penalty, right, for cop killers. And what are your thoughts about what we need to do to change this around?
I do support that. I think about the hardworking men and women in law enforcement that I've had the opportunity to get to know, which is frankly thousands at this point that I've interacted with in my district. And it is a crisis, the anti-law enforcement rhetoric and policies that we are seeing from Democrat elected officials. And we need to make it explicitly clear that we support our law enforcement, and we need to have policies that deter any type of targeting, any type of violence, or of course, murdering of our law enforcement. So it is a reckoning, and people spoke out against Kathy Hochul at the most recent funeral of Officer Diller, and it's because people are so fed up because they see that these are pro-criminal policies rather than pro-law enforcement policies in New York State.
Yeah, people are fed up. Well, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, really great to have you here on the show. Congrats again on the Jack Kemp Award. That is really a big deal. And bravo to you, and keep fighting the great fight, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. I'll see some of you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.